Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever and whenever you are watching or listening. This is the Holistic Monitor, and I'm your host, Nick Sconia. The Holistic Monitor podcast is a weekly show featuring guest interviews with discussions about self-discovery, philosophy, spirituality, and our relationship with the world around us. Your support this last year has meant the world to me, and you can now go to holisticmonitor.com to support the topics you want to hear with our new show merchandise, featuring hats, t-shirts, hoodies, and more. You can also support us by simply sharing your favorite episode with your followers. And with that, let's get the show started. And welcome to the Holistic Monitor. I am Nick Sconia, your host. And tonight we have a special guest, Maetreyii, and she's going to be going over details on what I'm calling transcending the realms. So let's bring her in. Hey, how you doing?
Hi. Good. It's good to be here with you.
Very good. So now I looked at your information. It will be in the description as well. Yeah. And I noticed why I'm calling this show Transcending Realms, because it seems that for the ordinary person that's going about their daily life, they're kind of in one world, and you have taken a different route and have kind of brought together multiple worlds into this one sphere for yourself. You being just like everybody else, and yet you have accessed these other realms. Does that sound like something that is your reality?
I think it is. Yeah, I have accessed deeper realms of consciousness. I think many people access them, though. I don't know that this is something just special to me, but definitely that has been a life pursuit of mine. To delve into the deeper unitary wholeness of being, and not only live in this material world. And I think that many people have interest and connection, that each of us has our own way of connecting with those deeper realms.
Yeah, I would say that we mostly access these in non-waking consciousness or non-awake consciousness, more like when we're sleeping. I would say that we have more access to the ethereal and different realms of consciousness from that direction, unless we're intentionally looking to find them or to still ourselves in the waking consciousness.
Yeah, I think that's true. You know, when you go into deeper sleep, you go into theta waves, brain waves out of the beta, and then the alpha is a relaxation, but then you go into theta and delta. And the delta is in the deep sleep, you really connect with the collective unconscious. But the thing is, you're not conscious. Through yogic meditation, through meditation practices, you learn to bring your conscious attention, your conscious awareness from the sensory experience through the subconscious mind into the collective unconscious, into this unitary realm. And when people are in deep states of consciousness, oftentimes on brainwave studies, they've been recorded as having delta waves, even though they're fully awake and conscious. But they're operating in a different brainwave, but they're operating consciously, which is something that we don't get to do in sleep. We don't remember our deep sleep state. We may remember our dreams, but not our deep sleep state.
Right. And that seems to be on purpose too. A lot of the body mechanisms do the healing and things that are necessary during the time of delta, which if I remember correctly, it's under or at 4 hertz. It's pretty low on the dial. You know, you're going really low on the brain function.
When you're in deep states of concentration, or in yoga, they call it samadhi. It's when you're in these deeper states, there is that change in brainwave structure. There's change in the physiology of your brain and the chemicals you're producing that go with that deeper state. And there's, I think, tremendous healing to your being that happens when you access that unitary wholeness of being and that connection with divine presence, which I think is that infinite oneness. That consciousness.
Now, for you, what would be if you ran into somebody randomly and you were to talk about who you are, where you've been, and how you got to where you're at now? What if you could sum it up in a, not an elevator pitch, but in a brief idea of kind of.
Okay. Well, right now, what I do with myself is I see some private clients as a psychologist, and I do satsangs and lead meditations and do spiritual teaching and teach people meditation. And I also am deeply involved with my books and being an author and writing. And so that's what I'm doing now. In the past, I ran yoga teacher trainings, yoga therapy trainings. We had a big training center here. We were in training a third of the year. So it was very intensive. And we usually had about 20 students at a time, and they lived here during training. And so I was a trainer for a long time, teaching people yogic philosophy and all of the things that you learn when you learn yoga therapy and yoga teacher training. We had other special teachers coming in for certain areas, but I ran the trainings, and I worked a lot doing that. So I've done that, and I've worked at organizing and administrative jobs, and worked in a developmental center as a psychologist. So I've got sort of a wide background, but my real origin comes from a deep connection to divine presence and bringing that presence into my life. And I feel by the grace of that presence, I've received teachings, and those teachings have been a foundation of my life. And my life has really gone in the direction of having a guru in India, having my inner guru, and having a deep foundation in meditation practices in the yogic tradition and in the Eightfold Path of Yoga and in classical North Indian Tantra. And so that has been a focal point for the teachings that I currently do.
And that is something we can find in your books as well?
Yes, you can. I have a number of books out, but the three most recent are my current book, which is, I have it right here actually, Into the Heart of the Infinite, which is, it's actually my spiritual memoir, and it's a spiritual memoir of an extraordinary mystical journey. And this book is about my own spiritual journey. And I've written it because I think that a lot of times the story of one person and their journey and our spiritual journeys are a teaching in themselves. They're a story that teaches who we are, what we are, and what it means to be on the spiritual path, what it means to work with spiritual transformation, with our doubts, with our fears. And this is my journey and how that's unfolded and the mystical states that happened and about mysticism and miracles and connection to the divine. So that's my primary book. But I also have Living Love, the Yoga of Yama and Niyama. And this is really about yogic practices, particularly the yamas and the niyamas, which are the ethical principles of yoga. But I'm a psychologist, and what I see in these ethical principles is they're ways of living in the world that allow you to be in alignment with your deeper self and to bring yourself into harmony with the world. And so this book goes into those practices and how they impact your life, and gives exercises to do them and so on. So that's a good book for anyone who wants to be on the yogic path. And then the other one is Dharma for Awakening and Social Change. And Dharma for Awakening and Social Change is about a lot. It brings in a lot of ancient yogic ideas and how they apply to what's going on in the world right now in our current situation. And it also works with Dharma, which is, you've probably heard that. It's a common term. I'm living my Dharma, or I'm not living my Dharma.
Right.
It is like, we each have our personal way in the world, and that's your Dharma, right? And then we have a collective Dharma as human beings, and that is to move towards wholeness, to move towards oneness, towards the infinite, towards love. And that is, this book is about both personal Dharma and how that works in our society.
Yeah, we are kind of, because of, I guess, the multifaceted lens of being able to see all around the world at any point in time, depending on where we want to focus our computer screen or our browser. We have the ability to see many different things in the world, I should say, in a connected way that never was before possible.
Isn't it true?
And to me, it's a very physical methodology towards an etheric or psychic or astral power that we would have naturally to be able to connect with people in a different realm, in a different place.
Even doing these broadcasts like this, it's we're able
this is very physical, but
yeah, but we're moving through time and space in a way that you wouldn't have been able to before.
Right.
And, I've discovered that I work online with people as a therapist, and I feel like I'm right there with them. And I also do meditations online and teachings online. And I find that if people meditate together online, even though some people are in Europe and some people in Canada and some people in the US, but we're right there together. And you can feel it. You can feel it. There's no spatial relationship. It's interesting. It doesn't look like physical travel.
I noticed that when I learned Reiki, distance Reiki, at the time there wasn't, at least in my world, there wasn't a lot of there was no internet connection that everybody had in their pocket. Definitely. There was phones, but long distance you still had to pay for, all that. But the idea and the concept of long distance healing was something that I really had to explain to people how that functioned. And I had, my best methodology would be to say, something similar to prayer. We're all connected, very vague and non-specific. And so much of the world has kind of grown up in terminology and understanding. I feel like that is a big help. That belief and understanding, knowledge is very important to kind of acclimate people to that higher access. Without it, without any of it, we'd probably be very connected, but having a little bit seems to kind of corrupt the mind. So you need more and more and more to kind of understand how things work and operate. So you distance healing very easily, I would say, especially with a Zoom or a video broadcast or something like that, because you really are in the room. The voice, the tone is present.
It's true.
Do you do that? Do you do work over the Zoom or whatever?
I was a psychologist over Zoom type of thing, yeah. And and I do satsangs online, and meditations, Dharma chakras online. And I find that people are right there.
Yeah.
It's very present.
Yeah, the technology itself has advanced in such a way that the image is very clear, and in most cases the signal's strong, everything is pretty much glitch free at this point in time, as far as video goes. As far as doing conferences or anything of that kind of thing, could definitely be done without too much of an error on the receiving side.
Yeah.
Now, do you work a lot with tones, intonations?
Sound? No, no, that's not my realm.
No? Okay.
I work with, I have, since my early 20s, an inner guidance from my inner guide, my inner guru, I call Baba. I was given the name Baba. It's just Baba, which, is used by many different gurus and teachers. It means father or respected teacher or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is in Slavic languages, it also means grandmother.
Oh, yeah.
And so I work with my inner guide, who I've received teachings from, and who, but I don't feel my inner guide is a person. I feel my inner guide is a manifestation of what would you call the higher self? Excuse me. I have a little bit of a cough still from a cold.
Oh, yeah. We all had the cold. Sounds like. I know I had it pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah, and the cough is hanging on. So, excuse me. Sometimes it comes up. So what happens is that inner connection, I feel, is I hear guidance and I receive guidance, and I feel an ability to let that guidance flow through. But I don't feel Baba as a person. I feel Baba is, it's like that divine unitary consciousness can embody as subtle energy gurus or guides who then bring through that cosmic force. But and the teachings, because all of it exists. All the teachings are everything. All the knowledge is there in the one. It's like surrounds it and comes from it. And I think that's how so much of our science has really developed, is people concentrating until they got the aha or the dream, like Mendel, who had the dream of the periodic table, right? Through that deep connectedness flows knowledge and energy and wisdom and guidance. But so I don't see Baba as a person. And he's told me, he describes himself as an aspect of the cosmic mind, rather than as an entity. So it's how that divine whole has manifested for me. And then I felt, I met my inner guru first, and then at one point in some deep experiences, he asked me to go to India and be with him in physical form. And I met my physical guru, Sri Anandamurti. And I found the same energy signature that I felt in my inner guru. And that was also a very deep experience. Many profound things, very miraculous things happened. And I had almost a year there in his presence, and then was back to my inner guidance, and many years of learning to be in the world, learning to deepen my connection to being here, because I think my first experiences were I was so passionately in love with divine and higher states of consciousness that I couldn't relate well to ordinary life. It just didn't hold the juice for me.
Right.
And it was a many-year experience. I came back from all of that mystical experience in India and all of that to, having a couple of kids and getting a Ph.D. and doing all of that busy in the world stuff, and I went from meditating 10 hours a day to meditating, 20 minutes if I was lucky.
Yeah.
And then the kids and everything,
Yeah.
but I kept with my practice and with my inner guide, and it sort of moved me to eventually some more deep, profound opening. But my journey has been one of synthesizing this deep, profound, holy presence that is it's a love so deep that no one can be near it without feeling, without crying, and without feeling over, like it's hard to exist in its presence. It's so beautiful.
Hmm.
To learning that this world is an embodiment of that, and all forms, if you really see it, it's creation lies within the body of the infinite, and all forms are the form of the one, playing out the dance of whatever things we're doing, right? But underneath that, in the deeper level of each person's being, of every plant, of every animal, of everything, of every rock, is that cosmic unitary beingness, that um, intelligent consciousness that is everything. And when I was able to drop into that more, then I found a transformation, a powerful transformation, because this world of form and is divine. And if you see it as divine, as if you see it as one, it completely transforms your relationship to it, is my experience. And it became, rather than something separate that was low frequency and low energy, it became the embodiment of that divine presence.
Hmm.
And I think that has been the deep work for me. Part of the deep work for me is making that transformation in my relationship to the mundane world, so that the mundane world becomes really not so mundane if you see it as embodying consciousness, embodying divine being. Then it's vibrant.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the first veil for a lot of people to uncover or look under, is that unified field, that place where all things join, that is really hard to see for all of the physicality around you, but to know that everything is vibrant. I always thought that the movie The Matrix did kind of a pretty good,
Yeah.
pretty good representation on a very, fun way, but of saying like there is another world outside of the world that you're in, and the world that you're currently in, you believe 100% everything is real just as you see it. It's like the trick of the material world. It's like, as you see it, that's all there is.
Yeah. Matrix is I love Matrix. It's great. It is a great demonstration of that. Yeah, that it isn't what you think it is.
Right. There's more to it, and everything, you totally believe it. You think that's air you're breathing, this whole idea of just completely being in. And of course, that morphs into the more scientific idea of the holographic world, which again is a concept, as long as it's blended with the different layers of consciousness and the different layers of existence, of spirituality. If you bring that all together, then that holographic concept and theory isn't too far off either. Is that the idea that we are in a representation, a skin of this other consciousness, of consciousness itself, perhaps, that might be experiencing the world in a physical way. Some of what I learned was that that oming, through oming, you can really open up or unify the consciousnesses and begin to see things on a scale where you can access the different realms through oming, just a simple, often made fun of practice, but it's super powerful. The practice of oming. It's kind of amazing how a simple intonation of a sound can do so much for us. The idea that we're maybe like a tuning fork and we're just kind of ringing the tuning fork.
That's right. That's right. And my husband's a kirtan player, and we have kirtans here. And it's a kind of the same thing, when you chant the names of God, and there gets to be a power in it that, and in the music that can, like chanting Om, bring you to a higher realm. And then in the silence of meditation, whether you use a mantra or whether you concentrate on a deity or a guru or some holy figure, or you use some other technique with the breath, it's just a slowing down until everything is really quiet, and the mind in that state of concentration slips into a flow, goes from concentration to meditation, meditative flow, to the absorption in the one, the samadhi states. And there's other ways that people experience this, and I think awe and rapture are words that are used in the English language for these things. I think that people also, some of the ways that people touch this are through nature. Like, you go out in nature and you see an amazing sunrise, or you just look out over the mountains, or you look out over the ocean or the lake, and your mind just, and in that moment of awe, there's that losing of separation, and you just feel the wholeness. I think that's one of the ways that people often touch the infinite. And also when you're with someone you love and you look into their eyes, and there's that moment where the two become one and there's no separation. That's another doorway, I think, that people have. And then people do chanting, they do like sound vibrations, like you're talking about, using sound. And then they do silent meditation. And the meditation practice really is there. It's called a practice because it's there to practice deepening your connection, learning how to open those neural pathways so that you deepen your connection and you feel that unitary wholeness. You can sort of step out of the dream. Matrix is a good way of putting it. The yogis call it, they say that this world is like a dream. It has a relative reality, but it's a dream reality that you awaken from, and that you feel like you're separate, you're caught in, when you're really not acknowledging these deeper states of consciousness, you're in a separate self. And that creates an immediate situation where you have to take care of you being a separate person, which means that you have to grab for what will sustain you, keep you safe, keep you okay, and you have to push away pain and push away anything that won't nurture you. And so you're in this grasping and this avoiding, and that ultimately becomes the human condition of suffering, because we never fully win that game.
Right.
There are always times when we lose that one. And eventually we lose it because we die. We lose these bodies, right? You know, there's no way to really win this game. So called this situation is called the human condition, or in yoga, the Yoga Sutras, they call it the kleshas. This situation that we're in of grabbing and fear of death and holding to life is the strongest of our fears, but we're always pushing those bad things away and trying to hold on to all those good things and make it all just right. Except, you know, it doesn't always work out.
Yeah. It's an embodiment of dichotomy there, for sure.
Yeah. And that is the human condition of suffering ultimately, because it's ultimately a no-win situation, because you're as a embodied being, a small part of a vast universe, and Mother Nature doesn't really put you in a special category. You know, you're part of the whole. But when you drop into that unitary wholeness and you kind of dissolve that dream of the separate you, then there's the feeling that you're part of the one, that you're part of the whole, that you are just an embodiment, as all other things are, of the God self, of the one. And that one is everywhere. And so when you drop into that, the more you drop into that, the more there's the recognition that there's a wholeness. You know, it's like in Matrix, coming out of the dream. But the reality you drop into when you exit the dream is the wholeness of being, and that you and everything else is part of one, and that there is no separation. That's a dream. That you are complete, you are whole, you are love embodied. And now, that's a powerful experience.
Yeah. Now, in that idea of connection, what could somebody say would be and it goes into a desire, let's say, so it kind of almost superimposes the reality back onto it. But if somebody wanted to pursue this and wanted to gain this ability, what would they see as a benefit, or what would draw them to it as a benefit? What's the hook, so to speak, of this technique?
There's a lot of hooks of, physical, psychological benefits when you're in alignment with wholeness. But the deep benefit is connecting with the deep love and the deep security. It's the solid ground. This material world is not actually the solid ground, and that we're living in a society. The last 400 years we've been under theories that the material world is the basis of everything, and new science is now developing in quantum physics and things, realizing actually the material world is not the basis of everything. It is consciousness is the basis. So the particles become the atoms, become the subatomic particles, become the waves, which are made out of even subtler substance of consciousness, of beingness. And so we realize that, the desk and me, well, what's our difference really when we get down to it? We're both made out of waves. We're both made out of consciousness. And when you really settle into that, there's a security there. Anandamoy Ma, who was a great spiritual teacher, have you heard of her? Anandamoy Ma, she's one of the greatest yogis of modern India. And she was this amazing woman who spent just weeks in these altered states of bliss. And she was just bliss poured from her. And she once met with Yogananda, and she said to him, "Father, before I came into this world, I was the same. Now, when I was a young girl, I was the same. I am the same now. And when I enter into the halls of infinity, I will be the same." And to me, that's such a powerful statement of that. When connected to that consciousness, that's it never changes. It's the
Right.
dream that changes. The reality is unchanging. And that's the solid rock.
Hmm.
You know, that's where you're safe. That's a lot better than the grasping and the fearing and the grasping and the fearing. That's
Yeah.
a hard place, really.
Yeah, it's very difficult, and I think most people would agree. It's a challenge. Life is a challenge. Now, and my thought on that, as far as why somebody would do it, depending on how they were raised, and maybe what religion they were raised in, you could change the dial of concepts and words to kind of fit to what they know and accept or understand as part of their religion, or what their base religion may have been, to help and assist them to find the balance of similarity in this approach of meditation and oneness to what the teachings are from somebody else that maybe was probably trying to say the same thing in a way. A lot of what I feel like is a benefit to building on that oneness and that strength of embodiment of that oneness in this current vehicle, in this current consciousness that you're embodying, is to have an awareness of that next place, or the infinite. Is to have training wheels on, so to speak, for when this time, which is finite for this vehicle, passes. We're not just pushed out and into this whirlpool, that we might have an ability to crawl or even walk in this other place because we're already accessing it in our daily life, in our joining our consciousnesses, so to speak, in our practice. I think a lot of what the idea, at least, behind Jesus' teachings is that there is a desire for understanding that you are the other person, and that you want to give as much love to them as possible, in that they're like a mirror, and it's you that you're giving love to. And so why wouldn't you? And it's almost like a love first kind of thing. But in doing that, it can break the barrier and seeing other people not as an other, but as the self, in one practice, one religious basis. But in that idea that that gives us better tools when we pass from this realm, when we, shut down this vehicle. We're not just thrown into this unknown world of infiniteness. We've already learned to do some of the legwork. We've took time to practice and prepare the way, so to speak, for our next adventure, our next journey.
Yeah.
Now, in your books, do you go into any kind of specific, teachings to help people to begin a practice?
Yes, I do. My spiritual journey book, Into the Heart of the Infinite, is really going into, through my own story, what the process of spiritual transformation entails. And it doesn't specify practices, but it really goes into, I would say, the psychology of transformation and what that's about. The Yama and Niyama book goes very specifically into those yogic practices, which are like ahimsa, doing no harm intentionally to other living beings, right? And what does that entail? How do you do that? How do you relate to that? And what impact does that have on your life if you do that? Satya, to be truthful. Well, you can say, well, I tell the truth. Well, do you tell the truth to yourself, really? Are you really living in authenticity? Are you really living your inner self in the world? Are you truly authentic? And as that goes deep, what does that do to you? How does that change how you relate in the world and how you relate to the universe? All of these practices, by working with who you are in your life, your behavior, your thoughts, in these practices, they bring you to a point where you can really meditate. Because sometimes it's hard to control the mind. It goes here, there, and everywhere when you try to meditate. But it's a whole process. It's like the more subtle you make your life, the more intuitional connection you have, the more your intuition is operating, and the more you can drop down and feel the infinite. So the practices of yama and niyama are really, really important in that process. And I think that every religion has a version of that, to try to bring you into right connection between you and the flow of the universe, so that you are in alignment in your words, your thoughts, and your deeds. So it does. I do go into detailed practices in there, and in terms of meditation practice, I think that that's something very individual and to be learned individually. So I tend not to teach that as a general thing that you put in the books, other than simple meditations.
Right. Basic brackets. This is what you're going to expect. I always done a lot of reading on it and in different philosophies. And one thing I feel like is used as a good enticement is superpowers. This is going to give you superpowers. They're just not the kind of superpowers you're thinking of, but these are superpowers to be able to walk in this world in such a way to have things affect you in a very different way than they did before. I feel like that is a superpower.
It is.
We just don't use those terms, but the ability to do these things is pretty super. It's pretty amazing. It's superhuman. But that isn't really the goal. It's like an offshoot. It's this extra bit that comes out of it.
Right.
Like, oh, okay. I'm living very differently. I'm handling life very differently.
Yes. So if you practice, like, let's take ahimsa, the nonviolence, right? And that was used socially by Martin Luther King. It was used by Gandhi, right? It's can be applied socially as well as personally. Right. But when you really work with non-injury in your life, the yogis say, Patanjali says in the Yoga Sutras that if you perfect that, no animals won't be afraid of you. It's like St. Francis, the birds come and land on he has this relationship because he really had harmlessness and loving kindness. And so animals, they just come to you. Living beings feel safe around you because you're not emitting harm. And there's that is a superpower.
Yeah.
To be able to really live in that kind of level of love,
and to have the world kind of agree with you in a sense, in a way of acknowledgement, to agree with the fact that you're beginning to, in a deep way, self-realize or self-reflect in that way. To see the bird as yourself, just another part of you,
And to have that love, it impacts animals, it impacts, so that's the beauty. Each of the yamas and niyamas if fully practiced, have a level of what we would call superpowers. They have a
Yeah.
level of you gain certain ability by doing them deeply
Yeah.
and fully in your life. But it's not to gain abilities. It's to deepen in your love, deepen in your authenticity, deepen in your harmony with all of life.
Yeah. And you can fly. So there's
Yeah. Hey, I just watched this movie the other night. We had a movie night here, and we called The Reluctant Saint. And it was about the saint who would, Saint Cupertino, who'd fly up in the air, and the same thing was said about Milarepa, that he would fly across.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Mhm.
so
All
who
the
knows?
saints would be flying with levitation. Yeah. Yeah, who
Yeah,
knows? Exactly. It's and what were they doing? They were accessing a deep connection to
that's right.
all that is the self, divinity, by many names. They were going in. And I feel like that is what most people are not doing. They're completely outbound, sense oriented, existence. So they're not going to see these things, and they may not view a person's attitude or approach to life as even something that's special, at least immediately, because they're in that outward expression of the senses. That's what they see and feel and hear and smell. It's overriding kind of everything that they've got going on.
That's right.
Um,
But
and
oh,
go ahead.
go ahead. Oh,
No, you're.
I was I was going to say that in our present culture, which is so information overload and stimulation constantly, the cell phone and the computer, and you're on it all day. It's like
Mhm.
we're so stimulated. Uh, I think it's even harder to get away from all the EMFs and get away from all the information overload and just settle in. Okay, here I am. Who am I? Who am
Mhm.
I? And just go in and find that deep resonance. I was reading the life of Milarepa, and I was realizing, there was nothing going on for those folks. He could like sit all day. He didn't have like a zillion
Right.
activities and stimulations. So in a way, I said, well, that must have been a lot easier, to just drop to a deep level, because
Mhm.
quiet and you're in nature, and I think one of the things that we all can do is spend a little time in nature, uh, and put away the cell phone and put away the computer. Make sure you get out in nature sometimes, and then just
Mhm.
breathe and meditate. Find a quiet spot and meditate and feel your connectedness with life.
Yeah. Now, I find that people that prepare to do the Appalachian Trail, as an example of a multi-month hike, that they have a lot of preparation that involves downsizing and de-obligating themselves to things in the world, because they're getting ready to embark on a journey where there's not going to be a lot of these things. Of course, cell phones, battery packs, and multi-stops, whatnot. People can have phones along the way now, but typically it's something that you would just basically drop as much extra weight as possible, not bringing them along, and disconnecting yourself from the things going on in the world, literally for months, completely with nature, uh, journeying
Yeah.
in a classic sense. That used to happen quite often. There's a lot to say that there's an innate uh, part of us that wants to migrate, that wants us to move, even with the seasons, if not just through life, in movement in life. But when you went to India, you probably also had to disconnect pretty heavily from everything, the goings on of the world. And that was probably very helpful, a disconnect from whatever you had going on without access.
Well, it was a completely different life.
Yeah,
but but that was before cell phones
right.
and before this level of, well, at least in my life, computer and stuff.
Mhm.
And when I went to India at that time, it was in the early 70s. They had no refrigeration, no television,
Mm.
no radio, no very, very few cars where I was, mostly ox carts and rickshaws.
Right.
And it was uh, it was not a modern technology
Yeah.
experience. And yeah, it was very different.
Even there. Yeah.
It was
Right.
very in many ways, but the
Yeah.
lack of technology was one, because people, that was before. India is very different now than it was then,
Right.
because India has come into, everybody has a cell phone, everybody has a television, it's not like it was. But
Right.
then
Yeah.
a lot of people were living like they would have lived 5,000 years ago if you go into the villages and things, and there was a lot of ancientness to the.
Hmm. That's something I've always loved about the culture, is that it is connected almost directly to the earliest instances of what we know as written and verbal history, as it goes so far back.
Yeah.
And you can tell it if you look at the Vedas. You can, just the way that they're written and what the writer is trying to like experience is profound. It's deep. It's heavy, and yet it's super simple. But it's
Yeah.
super deep.
Yeah. The Vedas are 7,000 years old, I think.
Yeah.
Um, they've traced the uh, they've traced the dating because the Indus River ran in a certain pathway,
Hmm.
and then that's described in the Vedas, and then in the Rig Veda, and then it changed. It actually changed course. So they
Wow.
had been written prior to the change of course of the river. So they're dated before 7,000 years. Yeah, and there's a whole, the ancient world that's a really fascinating discussion and area of interest to me, because there was such an amazing culture that we didn't realize in the ancient world,
Yeah.
and so much more interconnectedness than we ever knew. But they're also yoga has its origins really with the Rig Vedas, which came from with the Aryans who came from Kazakhstan and down into
Mhm.
northern India. But there was also the tantric tradition, which was really ancient, which was with the indigenous people of India, and they were dark-skinned people, and
Hmm.
uh, the these traditions are really old, and the philosophical base of yoga, which was really began with the Upanishads,
Mhm.
was is ancient, and yoga became the foundation of Hinduism and of Buddhism. So it's a kind of an esoteric practices that really are foundational to also Jainism, to three
Okay.
religions.
Mhm.
And I just wonder how much they've influenced Western thought also through philosophers of the 17th and 18th century who got exposed to the mystical thinking of the East.
Mhm.
And it's always the yogic path has drawn me because it has a deeper, it's out of every cultural sort of way of looking at it that I've looked at, it has the deepest understanding of the nature of reality, I would say. It presents it the clearest. I think the same understanding is there across the board, but maybe it's more clearly refined and defined. So I've been very drawn to that because of that.
Yeah, I feel like, and that's one of my recommendations for people to look at is the Upanishads. Um, I believe it was passed down verbally first before it was even written down, and it was written down 3,000 years ago or something like that, and
Yeah.
and added to over time. There's a lot of them, but all kind of following suit with the same philosophical basis. And I believe it's Mohenjo-Daro, one of the oldest known cities. I think it could be called a city that is in like the Pakistan Indus area there.
Indus Valley, yeah.
Yeah.
Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro.
Yeah. That they found, and I could be wrong. I could be inaccurate. I'd love somebody to correct me. That'd be great. But they found little trinkets or little idols that were of a person sitting cross-legged, emaciated, and that would be very similar to what we would see as Shiva or Siva, having a really early basis, because that's 8,000 BC, I think.
There's a 5,000-year-old plaque that they found, which was Shiva sitting, meditating with all the animals around, the same image that has been carried forward later to be a symbol of Shiva. Yeah, and that was 5,000 years ago that was, I think, in Mohenjo-Daro.
Yeah, I believe so. And that's, to me, that's amazing. And if you look at the Siddhartha story, Buddha, that you have this very similar kind of like a storyline that ends with being Buddha versus being Siddhartha or being Siva or Shiva. But there's a point in time where he's on this journey of self-discovery, that he absolves himself from everything and is just living in nature, very raw and fully meditating all the time, barely eating, emaciating. And it's out of that he finds the next step, which is indulgence, I guess. And then it's the balance between the two is the path. You could almost see that as like a story that is evolving the story of Shiva and saying, well, the next step is the middle way, or is that kind of idea. Though I don't think it's separate. I don't think that Buddhism takes the middle path. Maybe it expounds upon it, but I don't know that it can claim it as its own discovery.
Well, as I said, it was out of yogic philosophy that both Buddhism and Hinduism have taken their life.
The branch, yeah.
Yeah, so they come from the same philosophical base, from the same teachings. And the Buddha...
And that stems to yoga.
Yes, the Buddha was a yogi.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, isn't that wild?
Yeah, and Padmasambhava, who brought Tibetan Buddhism to to Tibet, who brought Buddhism to Tibet and started Tibetan Buddhism, was a classical North Indian tantric. So what he really brought to Tibet was classical North Indian Tantra, which combined with the Bon religion and became Tibetan Buddhism.
And that combined with what was already there or present?
Right, which was the Bon.
Bon, okay.
Shamanic Bon religion, which had a lot of demons and, colorful things that went on.
Yeah. Now, when you are in your practice, something new that I'm asking everybody, are you seeing entities or other things? Are there other things coming to you? You mentioned the images in Tibet. So that brings me to that concept and idea that there are more than a few things in the world that exist. Are you experiencing any of that within your meditations? Yeah.
I've experienced different deities and different gurus coming in my meditation. And I talk about it in my book, Into the Heart of the Infinite. And I experienced that. And I've also had experiences of people who have crossed over to the other side, who've left their bodies, coming to me, especially in the first week after they've died.
Yeah.
And even a cat I had that hung around for a week. So I've had different experiences like that also, just here and there. Usually people need something, and I think they don't know who to talk to, they don't know. So I happen to be there. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I do think that there are other realms. I have my own guide, and that's my sort of lifeline in that, my Baba. But other beings have come from time to time. Other gurus, Anandamayi Ma, Ramana Maharshi, they've come in my meditation. And also beings I've never, like this Tibetan deity, I have no idea who it was, but
Mm-hmm.
there one day.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Have you found that Buddhism or Hinduism kind of has it right as far as their storyline or their concepts of working within these realms? Do they have it right in a way that you say, "Yep, I can see the agreements of commonality"?
I don't know about all the gods and goddesses, and I think there's one self, one truth, and it has many forms. I don't know what to say about other than that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of gods and goddesses.
Yeah, a lot of energies and entities and
Yeah.
aspects of the one
Yes.
in the higher realms, as well as kind of all over the place.
Yeah. And I do think there are different realms. There. When we leave our bodies, if we leave in a state of duality, then I think we do cross the veil, and we, depending on, the our level of consciousness, we may be in different realms of some kind. But I do think that when you drop into the one, there's no veil. There's no separation. When you're in that oneness, whether you're in a body or you've left your body, it's the same. It's like Nandamayi Ma said, it's the same.
Yeah, and that oneness. So, are you seeing that more people are getting involved, and there are more people kind of finding that oneness?
I couldn't say. I do think that there are statistically a lot more people in the United States and Europe meditating than there
Okay.
were previously, way more. How many people are touching, at least I would say the majority of people have some kind of connection to that wholeness, like that moment they had in nature or sitting out fishing in the boat, and there's that moment where it all just becomes one. But how many people have extended that to some sort of practice that deepens them into that level? It's very hard to say.
Yeah.
I think the traditional religion, that some of the, old Catholic little old ladies who went and lit the candles and prayed deeply, and I think that some of those people probably reached pretty amazing states of consciousness, because they had such devotion, such love for God, such love for that which is holy, that, I'm sure they had very deep experiences. So hard to know what it is now, what it's been. I don't know. What do you think?
That's a good question. Yeah, my ponderings are that there may be an illusion that there are more people because there's more people. So the
That's
numbers have just kind of gone up. It's hard to say. I think we're waiting for a tipping point of consciousness to kind of override, and we're not there. And I say we are waiting for it by just saying that a bigger spread of people, a bigger awareness and interest. But I don't know. It's hard to say because there are so many more people. There's going to be potentially that same amount of people. It'll just seem like, wow, it's now 15 million, but that's like a drop in the bucket to the 7 billion or whatever, you know.
Yeah. So it's
hard to say.
But I do feel that there is a transformation of consciousness going on the planet. And the internal guidance I get from Baba is that we are in a process of transformation to a higher frequency, to a new age, whatever you want, however you like to phrase it. But
Right.
we're in a transformation process. But the thing about transformation processes is that a lot of times you have to deconstruct in order to reconstruct at a higher level. So that in the transformation process, there's it can be difficult. There's a lot
to it.
construction of what was.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where a lot of people get stuck is this. It's almost the dramatic part, the loss of things, the breakdown. That's where a lot of people get caught up because the rebuild is almost the guidance and the blessing coming out of it. And through tragedy, a lot of different things can happen, but one of them is getting trapped in a circle or a cycle of energy. And another one would be a positive moving spiral. It's just very hard to see upwards in moments of that kind of deconstruction of concept.
It's so true. When horrible things are going on,
yeah,
this is just all that is, and that can just overwhelm you. But I do think if you stay connected to the inner core and to that light and love, the positive and to the just the knowledge that the future is bright. That's what I get from my Baba all the time, is that the future is bright, and it doesn't mean that hard things won't happen, but that there's a movement going on, and it isn't a movement towards darkness and decay. It's a movement towards expansion and towards the light.
My last guest, 2 guests ago, I should say, not my last guest, but my 2 guests ago, Carl Kalaman, Dr. Carl Kalaman, he wrote a book about the Mayan cycles of time. And he goes into the idea that there are like a spiral, a different, you hit a different rung and you're going through a different level of consciousness, and that we're in, like, we just entered into, in the last, 10 years or so, the 9th wave, another wave of consciousness, of consciousness developing in a way. And and this is through like the Mayan calendar or the Mayan understanding of consciousness. Even the Mayans, they have images of meditation and a deep, what seems to be a deep respect for introspection within the glyphs. They seem to have a connection to understanding consciousness and the flow of time and space.
Right.
Is connecting with the one, is going into that 4th, 5th dimension where we're not involved in the time space dilemma. Let's say, call it that.
Yeah. It works differently.
Yeah, it works differently. Something I'm pondering, and I would love your thoughts on it, is that if we are embodied now in a finite in time and finite in structure space, let's see if I can word this correctly, then we already have fully experienced this whole life. So there could be a potential for us to look forward into our life as a whole in this capsule, in this realm, that we could possibly experience our beginning and our end, our birth and our death in this life itself. And that I'm trying to figure out is this quickening, this feeling of the time quickening as someone gets older. When you're young, it's really like real gradual, and then when you get older, it kind of seems to speed up real
Yeah.
fast. I'm wondering if consciousness itself, being attached to no time, is already knows like when the end is going to be there, and so it quickens it in relation to how close you are towards the end. Whereas in the beginning it was really slow and you're really far away from the end. As it gets closer, the experience of time moves faster. I just
Wow.
wonder if you have any thoughts on like our experience of time in this moment, and potentially because there is no time and space in a sense, at least for the consciousness, that it's experiencing it in such a way that it already knows what's going on. So the closer you're getting to the one side, it's just zooming right along in a sense.
Well,
It's the
I never,
opposite of the beginning.
yeah, I never thought of that. That might be,
I
that
don't know
might,
if it's true, but
yeah, it's an
yeah.
interesting. Um, in terms of time, I think time is one of those things that's very fluid. And the deeper you go towards unitary consciousness, the more it slows down. It gets slower and
Mm.
slower. Um, and ultimately, it stops.
Yeah.
Time stops. There is no time. Time and space, there are convergence. There is no time. Time is a relative thing. I once was in a Bentoff. I don't know if you know Bentoff, but he was teaching a class at ITP that I was in, Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. And so
Mm.
we did this experiment where we'd all look at the second hand on our watches, and then we'd do 3 breaths together, and then we'd stop the time, and we'd stop the second hand on our watch, and you could watch the second hand stop. And then it was just there, and there was no movement. The second hand would not move. And for a long time, we're sitting there looking at the second hand on the watch, and it's not moving, which meant that the time wasn't moving. Because in normal time, in this time span that you and I are in right now, time is moving, right?
Right.
And that
Yeah.
second hand would be moving. But we were able to slip between the cracks just by breathing
Mm.
together. And that second hand stopped. Well, the second hand on the watch didn't stop. We slowed time.
Yeah.
We moved into a time space where that second hand hadn't moved from one little spot to another because that much time had not passed in the time that we were in. So you can move, consciousness can move into different time spectrums. And I don't know, it's interesting. I understand the physiology of the pineal gland shrinking up to a raisin from a nice big prune,
Mm-hmm.
that affects time perception.
Right.
But I also think that the time perception is very it depends on where your consciousness is hanging out. And time and space and like past, present, and future. The past has already happened, the future's gonna happen, but there's a realm where they're all right there. And that's why sometimes you can see things that are going to go on in the future. People see things in the future. How do they
Yeah.
see them in the future if they haven't happened yet? On some level, they've happened. On some level, it's all happening right now. So
Yeah.
I don't think that the physics of what is quite as we have projected it in our linear understanding of it all.
Yeah. It's hard to understand. It's better to experience, I feel like.
Yes.
Hard to reason with, because once you touch the infinite, once you get into it, you realize the inability for the mind for thinking to really work with that. It doesn't go and count forever. The mind just doesn't do that. It asks you
Yeah.
to start at a number, and it counts off until you give up. And you will. You'll count as high as you want, but you're not going to get that far. At some point, you're going to stop. It's just the way that the mind is. It will not go into infinite realms. It can't. It's part of this.
Yeah. And
part of the vehicle.
That's what to experience the oneness is to short circuit the mind.
Yeah.
Because the mind can't experience. Your consciousness can experience. The mind. So our usual thing is, well, we'll avoid that and we'll grab after this, right? Well, so we try to meditate and we do the same thing. Oh, I want to grab that higher state of consciousness. That sounds like a good thing to have. So I'm going to acquire that. Well, it doesn't work. It's going to slide through your fingers. Like it's just because your little mind can't hold the universe. It just doesn't. It's not big enough. It has to let go.
Yeah, it's the fool's errand for sure.
Yeah. So the real process of meditation isn't a process of, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to really learn to concentrate and I'm going to acquire these benefits of meditation and deeper consciousness. There's a point where it's just letting go and letting God, right?
Right.
It's not an acquisition because, as you said, it doesn't. You can't hold it with the mind. Our minds just are not equipped.
Yeah, they're part of this structure. It's part of this world that we live in. But we'd like to, we just can't. It's fun to go there and think about it, but it just won't make any sense. Can't. And the idea, I believe, has something to do with gravity and how we're basically on a really, really large time-space ship called Earth that's, creating time by movement and measure and gravity and pressure and space, electromagnetics. All of these things give us this experience and this movement, and we're experiencing time in such a way that, for us, it's relative to where we are. If you're up higher, time moves. Is it slower? I think it's slower if you're higher, right? It moves slower if you're like in space, outside of the planet, relative to people here, where time and the atoms and everything closer to the core is higher intensity and more faster movement and experiencing time and the wares of time faster. I think that's what they just did a study where they sent a twin up, an astronaut.
Excuse me, cat.
Yeah, it must have been a cat. He saw something he didn't like on the counter and he batted it off. But they did this experiment, and the astronaut that was in space, he was slightly different atomically in some way.
Wow.
But very minute, because I think it was a year. He was in space for a year or 2 years, something like that. And this was fairly recent, in the last 10 years or so. There were changes. There were things that had changed. And one of them, and I don't know if he had a watch on and it was like, well, time's different. The atomic clock in my watch is different. But there were differences in time, basically. There was a lot of physical issues with being in that kind of gravity that's not Earth for a body. But the atoms, I believe, had spun slower, if I remember correctly.
Oh, interesting.
Way out on the rim, so to speak, of the spin. Whereas here, we're moving pretty quick at 600 something miles an hour. We just don't know it. We're not aware.
Yeah.
And we're just really close to the center.
Yeah. How does that relate to consciousness, I wonder?
That's a good question. I think consciousness transcends. So I would like to say that it only affects the blinders. It doesn't really affect the consciousness. because the consciousness is a universal principle. So it should be the same. Consciousness should be the same on Mars and the moon and the sun, and outside of this realm. It's a connecting point for all these things. So it shouldn't have anything to do with consciousness. The experience, I don't know, because it would already have been written. So it would already be in the play of time, space, or the fifth dimension. It would already be a possibility that was played out, so to speak. And that's where I see the future as trends towards an infinite possibility. There's just anything can happen, but I lose it when people go into the realm of there's a million or an infinite number of me's performing the same thing over and over. I lose that. I lose it. I feel like that's the mind in the Hall of Mirrors trying to figure out infinity. And it's like, oh, there's a zillion of you, and that doesn't make any sense.
And yet we're able to see the future. We're able to know things that will happen.
Yes, and I think that is, there is an infinite potential, and we are completely connected to it. And I feel like the outcomes, these futures that we see or are told are going to happen, are because there's no other way to evade them. But there are an infinite number of choices that a person can make within the sphere of time and space. There's many possibilities, but most of them, from what I understand in shamanism, the same idea is that, you may think that, wow, I'm way outside of the box, but really you're just in another part of your potential. Your end is still going to be the same. You're just in the sphere of yourself, of your own
it's
beingness. And that would already be written, most likely. It's kind of like the candles and the fates, or where you just have your candles going down and it's already been cut. We already know when it's going to end. It's not like, but what are you going to do between time? What are you going to develop and build? And, how are you going to manifest? How much light are you going to spread within your sphere? Or how much are you going to keep dark? That idea of doesn't give us necessarily free will. I think that's the idea. We are in a realm of choice, but there's only so much that we can do. It's really difficult to get outside of humanness in that choice. And that goes into Gilgamesh, which is one of my favorite stories, which is a tale about fate and destiny and free will and fate. Do you have free will, or are you fated? And what are your thoughts on that? Do you have free will?
I think it's another one of these things where we're talking about levels.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a yes or no answer to that question. I think there's a level where you have free will, and there's a level where it's already all happened. And there's no separation between the past and the future and the present, and that it's all written, and that it is all happening now. And you're in all of those different things now. It's level of time space continuum that when consciousness moves deeper, the time space continuum breaks down, and there isn't space and time. It's like everything really is the same. It's one. And in the movement to that one, and then there's a point where there is no time, there is no space. There never has been. It's a dream that no longer exists. Like in the Matrix, in a way, huh?
Yeah. Right.
So it's relative. That's what I can say. That's my on it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. Whenever I love the discussion about those kinds of things, but I always see myself as the fool, because it's,
How can,
delving into a realm that I'm not going to understand. Yeah. But the experience of oneness is the key.
it is.
Yeah.
It is. And that it's something accessible for all of us. It's something that is our own nature. That light, that love, that beauty is within us. And
Yeah.
we may have all sorts of um, shadowy, dark feelings about ourselves or things that we've done, but that's not the deeper part of us. That's out here.
Right.
And we can move apart from that, and we can align with that inner nature and with that light and learn to live in more harmony with it, more harmony with the universe. And when you're living in harmony, your intuition opens up. A lot of things open up. You know who's on the phone, you just, your intuition is there stronger because there's a flow of energy between you and the rest of the universe,
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, it's the ability to connect to things at a distance, to know that somebody is thinking about you, and then the phone rings or something of that
yeah,
nature,
yeah,
that you can't understand. There's no understanding that. There's
yeah,
only experiencing it and developing that, by fullness and discovery, self discovery. Yeah.
yeah. And it's that alignment with the universe, that alignment, I think, that allows, then naturally unfolds that you're just more connected. You're intuitively more connected because you're in flow, you're in alignment, and you're living in authenticity. And so
Hmm.
the practices of yama and niyama that I read about are really about developing that. And um, through meditation, through inner work, I think we develop that capacity. And you talk about different dimensions. Maybe that's how we move into different dimensions.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I believe the storyline of the Merkaba is to create, through meditation, create a vehicle that will allow you to astrally travel, um, to disconnect and move about and develop a different body, different part of yourself, basically, to be able to function outside of the body,
Mm.
um, which is a pretty cool concept and idea in practice as well. Um, what are we thinking as far as the heart of the infinite? And in this book, we're going into your story in this book. Is that right?
It's my journey. It's my, and it really goes into a lot of sort of my mystical experiences and um, just the whole journey and what it's about and how the spiritual transformation happened for me and the shadow side and the struggles that I've gone through, as well as uh, the love I've experienced and the divine presence and guidance. And so uh, it's my story. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll have it linked in the description. It was a
Okay.
fantastic discussion. Really great talking to you and getting to talk about all these great ideas and concepts and practices.
And I also want to mention that if people want to contact me, my website is yogama.org. That's yogama.org. And if you get on my mailing list, and you can write me a note on that. And if you want to connect with me, just let me know. Or you can come to one of my satsangs on Saturdays, and we can connect in that way.
Excellent. Excellent. I'll have that link for your website in the description as well. And again, a pleasure absolute pleasure talking with you tonight.
It's wonderful
And,
yeah, it's been quite a discussion.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
Sorts of in all different directions.
Oh yeah, we love it. I hope you have a great night, and hope to talk again.
Yes, you be well. It's been delightful to be here with you.
Thank you. Yep.
Take
Take care.